class. This will be the last one for today. Talk about building a flexible fleet. We're going to be using my fleet for an example. My fleet is based around basically ground operations, but also being a core for a bigger organization or fuel for a organization to function. Being very generalist, being able to provide support to a bunch of different utility roles throughout the fleet, throughout the org, basically. And even without that, you're going to at least be able to do some things on your own. So the fleet basically has 4 components. And I might just bring up Word if I can. I'm just doing this stuff off the top of my head. I haven't really thought this hard into it, but 4 parts for my fleet. You're going to have military escort utility. Supply chain. Ground transport and repair. Exploration and utility. Basically. This is built around expeditionary fleets from the US military. And that's essentially what I've built is you're going on an expedition, you're going to investigate a planet. You're going to need to be able to function and operate in a lot of different environments. You don't really know what you're going to find to be there. So we have to cut as much fluff as possible and condense things down as much as possible. But this also goes into single play. So military escorts, we're looking at Polaris, Perseus times 2. And then potentially a Kraken. Okay. For most just normal standard orgs, you're probably going to be looking at one center capital ship that you want to focus on for whatever gameplay loop that you want to do. Now, for me, the main one is the Kraken. And the Polaris is technically something that I could cut, but it's versatile, it's useful. See if I can zoom in on this a little bit, make it a little bit easier. Maybe zoom out a little bit. Supply chain, pretty simple. Mainly you just need cargo transports, which can be pretty much anything that holds cargo. But primary support supply chain is Starfares. Reason being, Starflares produce and store fuel, but they also have internal cargo capacity. Right now, they have 200 plus cargo capacity. A Connie or whatever has like 96 SU of cargo capacity. Taurus has less than a Starfare. The crew size is like 5 or 6. You have size 5 turrets, I believe, on Gemini. Specifically, I would go for Geminis with this. But you have the ability to transfer food, water, anything that you can like want to transport back to civilization. You could use Starfares for. But one of the main points that I have for this is that when we go to ground bases, you're going to have, uh, you know, liquid production facilities and stuff, not only just mining on a surface. So if we're going to be transporting liquids, probably going to want a Starfare to do that for the most part. And since it can carry liquids and it can carry, a good amount of cargo, it's just an overall good generalist ship. And in a fleet of Starfares, depending on how many you have, it extends the range exponentially by how much you want. So if you want to move some, you know, mining materials and stuff from your planetary base out in the middle of nowhere all the way back home, you could pile up like a fleet of Starfares, and they can all just refuel each other and refill, whenever they need, keep going. They have huge amount of fuel capacity depending on how many Starfares you have, and that's kind of a big deal. But at the minimum, you know, they can help you fuel and maintain your ground operations, your bases, and your vehicles, which you're going to need at some point. And we've already seen during, CitizenCon and stuff where they've talked about you can have fuel-powered energy systems for your ground bases, and they're faster to build than anything else. So it makes sense to make that your first building if you want to get down quick and get things set up. Pop down the power, fill it up with a Starfare, get it going. Quick, easy, boom. You're gonna need fuel. It's a thing. Um. Oh. Yeah. Cargo ships, and then we had ground transport and repair. Okay. So we got a general idea of what this consists of. There's basically 11 ships here on the small end. And then I would also potentially put Vulcan X2. Now, there's 3 to 4 parts here. I can just separate these, I guess. The Kraken can kind of fill any role. Okay. So ideally what you're looking at is you're trying to hop planet to planet, find cool things to harvest and kill and whatnot, get into conflict. Now, even as a solo player, if I look at this fleet, I have options here. I can get into Liberator, crew of 2. I can load it full of ground vehicles and do any ground operation I can think of. I can do ground assault, I could do mining operations, I could do ground salvage, I could do cargo, I could do ferrying vehicles. The options are endless, all right? Putting Vulcans on top, I could do repair on top of all that. So I could mine people, like I could mine on the ground and do repair and stuff all day if I wanted to. I could do mining and put a expanse or something on top and have my refinery there. So I can mine and refine and put it on top and have a Vulcan there. And then the reason you'd want a Vulcan there, particularly, is to um, repair your mining vehicles. And this also could, potentially be something viable, a Vulcan in an Endeavor, or not Endeavor, an Expanse or whatever, as a refinery ship in the bigger overall picture of the fleet instead of having two Vulcans. If you wanted something mobile that you could just bring in, put on site, refine some stuff, and bring it back, not a big deal. But you're looking at, if I have one or two people, easy enough to do. Liberator, I can get it done, and I can do pretty much any role in the game if I want to. All right, I can put medical Pisces on there. I could put medical ships on there. Medical Cutlass. You can still do a medical Cutlass with 2 players. So you can do medical, you can do exploration. You could put a Terrapin on there. You could go and put ground vehicles on there. You could put uh, I don't know how big of a ship that you're going to put on there, but there's a lot of flexibility. Then so you get to a bigger group, you got a squad of like 6 to 8. All right. Well, now you can use a Carrack for exploration or whatever, or you can use a Polaris. Okay. And then if one of those gets destroyed, because we've already seen in game, you can get insurance and stuff on it, but it's still going to take time before it comes back. So if you don't want to be stuck out in the water and not have anything to do besides get on someone else's ship, you're going to need a backup at some point, because we don't know how long it's going to take for these things to spawn back. Right now, it's, 40 minutes or something. I would prefer to just play for 40 minutes. If my whole crew dies, I would prefer to get into a second Carrack, go out there and find the first Carrack and try to like skeleton crew at home or repair it. That's a lot more interesting than setting in town all day. All right. Perseus would be the military version of that. So you'd have crew of 6 potentially or more. If one Perseus goes down, you can pull out another Perseus. If you saw some of the videos that the last video I think we did where we talked about potentially a skeleton crew on a Perseus being 3 or 4, and with 6 you could potentially run one turret and have 2 Furies in the bottom, then you should be able to do the bulk majority of a lot of bounty missions that you could in the game. And this is without having a huge crew. This is only 6 people, half the crew of the Polaris, which this will give us a backup for. And then once you get enough people to crew 2 Perseus or whatever, well, then y'all could jump over and hop into a Polaris. And then the Polaris is going to let you do bigger, better bounty missions. So you still have options for all the smaller missions and the bigger missions. And together, this is a full package to help you escort anyone's fleet. So you'd need, what, 24 people or whatever to run this military escort operation here, potentially. You have medical facilities, you have anti-cap, anti-subcap, anti-fighter, because you should be trained at this point to fight this. And with the Polaris, we've also seen that it has air shields in the cargo hangars and stuff now. So potentially, you could fit more fighters in this Polaris, and it's the only ship that I have seen people, like, no one's talked about it being a carrier ship at all that I've seen. But if those cargo bays can fit snub ships, this could be a carrier. and still carry like an Eclipse or something in the back. So you have strike potential on a variety of targets and potentially a fleet. Like just imagine like Furies. You just drop out Furies here, and you have a medical bay, so you're going to be able to get people that die from the Furies, put them back inside. So this is a pretty interesting package in and of its own for a military escort. Okay. Now the same thing with the Carrack. If you have that group of people, you got like 6 to 8. You could fly Carrack. If the Carrack goes down, you could easily go and pick up a second Carrack. You get 8 people, you could easily pair this up with a Liberator, extend how many extra, scouting vehicles, exploration vehicles, ground vehicles, and stuff that you need. You can extend that, and also your storage capacity, because this has like 400 storage capacity or something. Not bad. And you can grow from this to any other point. Now, if you're able to do 2 Carracks at once in a Liberator or something, then you can do a Kraken. And if you can do a Polaris and 2 Perseus, you could potentially do a Kraken. And a Kraken with 2 Carracks is basically a light expeditionary group for a planet, because you're going to have your size 8 turret that can still deal with some bigger ships. You're going to have size 5 turrets and size 4 turrets on the Kraken. You'll have your fighters and whatever other vehicles on top of the Kraken that you want, and you're going to have your 2 Carracks, which could potentially do anti-fighter stuff or anti-torpedo or whatever else that you want, but you're going to have to be, trained and practiced for that. So there's a lot of flexibility here to be able to go from a Kraken, um, and have mining ships, salvage ships, anything else that you potentially want. Then also, making any money from any of these professions here, you could easily swap out the Carracks for any other thing. The Carrack is just a generalized ship that I'm putting into the game because it has, scouting and scanning. I want to do exploration and stuff. I want to land on planets. I want to mine ground minerals and stuff like that. So I think exploration is going to be good. But you could easily pair this up with like a reclaimer or anything else that you want. You could easily pair it up with starfarers. So there's a lot of flexibility with the Kraken, just like the Liberator, when it comes to putting together a fleet design and figuring out what people want to do for the day. So there's a lot of flexibility here and a lot of different sizes of groups that you can use. So you got 2+ people on, you could do the Liberator and some stuff. You got enough people to do 2 Crucibles, you can do some stuff. A lot of flexibility. But once you go up into a bigger organization, this is where things start coming more together. So Kraken and 2 Carracks, let's say that's your expeditionary, like, main group of ships. So you have scouting capabilities, you have jump point navigation capabilities, you have, some drones, you got some repair functions, you have the Kraken's repair bays to help you repair your Pisces and things. You could potentially put the 2 Vulcans on top of the Kraken as well to do some extra repair functionality for people around on a planet. You have however many Kraken medical beds are in the Kraken, plus the medical beds in the Carrack to do medical search and rescue for people on the surface. So there's a lot of benefits, a lot of different things that you can hit. You could do bounties, you could do exploration, you could do mining, you can do search and rescue, you can do repair and refuel. So there's a whole lot of stuff that you can do just in that package with a few ships together. Now, getting from one place to another place could potentially be dangerous, and not all the time are you going to be able to just send out, a Kraken with some Carracks and get to where you need to go, which is where the military escort group comes in. So when you combine a Kraken with 2 Perseus, that's already a lot of turret firepower. All right, you got a lot of torpedoes, a lot of turret firepower, a good amount of anti-fighter defense. That's a pretty, beefy target for somebody to try and decide to fight. And if you have 2 Krakens on top or Carracks on top of that, you got even more anti-fighter support, you know, and potentially like, your drones or whatever else, if they have any sort of help when it comes to radar. But the Polaris puts it right over the top, where you have huge capital radar, you have potentially, escort little snub ships in there, you have torpedoes, you have turrets, you have size 5 or size 6 turret on the front now, and it means that when the Kraken and the Carracks get to a planet's surface, potentially you can just pull the Polaris and the Perseus back. They don't have to stay there. So they escort you to the planet. They can leave if they want to. You're still going to have your Kraken's defenses. You could leave one Perseus there even as like a kind of ship to call in to attack and do some stuff on the surface if you need it. But this escort doesn't really have to do anything. So after you get people on the ground, you could easily just send these back and then transport them back over there. But the real thing comes with your ground operations, being able to build a ground base on the planet. So we go to ground transport and repair, the Liberator and 2 Crucibles. And the reason I'm doing a Liberator and 2 Crucibles and not like 3 Liberators or anything else like that is because, one, I think the Crucible could potentially have more functionality than we think at the moment when it comes out, maybe not. But during the Q&As, they've said that the Crucible can pretty much repair anything, but it can't repair itself all the way, depending on where the damage is. So having 2 Crucibles means that you probably have the benefit of having um, the flexibility to keep repairing your Crucibles, keep them operational, but also you're going to be able to repair multiple escort ships at the same time. So you can do, each Perseus if it gets damaged. You could potentially repair the Kraken faster. You could repair the Carracks if they're both damaged. So there's a lot of flexibility there. You can repair and upkeep your Starfarers, you know. So there's flexibility. On top of that, it has an openable bay that is supposed to be detachable and put on the ground at some point. And if that continues to be a thing, then essentially this is a vehicle garage. And we've seen pictures of the internals of the old Crucible design where it had like an Ursa rover and some stuff in there. So it can probably fit a tank. It's probably like one pad area of the Liberator that we've seen so far. So if it can fit a tank in there, maybe it can fit a couple ballistas or something. But the main deal is that it would be able to do mining vehicles and base building vehicles. And the Crucibles can hold like 250 something SCU. Now, if we look at the Pioneer, they've said that it has 1,000 SCU or something right now, which is a lot of SCU, don't get me wrong. But what that tells me is if the Crucible is a base building ship and the max cargo capacity it has is 1,000 and it can mine more resources out of the ground, then 1,000 is at least a good amount of SCU to have for production and base building. Now, with 2 Crucibles, if they have like 250 SU, let's say, that's already 500. Put a Liberator in there, you're already pushing 1,000, all right? So pretty much you're on par with a Pioneer right there. But the benefit is you get more functionality because the Pioneer can't repair, capital ships and things like that, and it can't separate itself into multiple areas. So with 2 Crucibles, potentially you could have 2 mining operations. So say that you have a Crucible and rock DSs inside of it. You land, you start mining. Rock DSs get damaged, they just go back in the Crucible and they repair. You know, if anything crazy happens, you can just do something and repair. If you need base or like ground defense, so say like you bring a base building vehicle and some ballista, then you could potentially use the ballista, bring them back in there and repair. There's things that you could do with it, but the biggest one is when you land on a planet surface, you need to be able to keep your equipment ready to go. And if you get into a fight against an already pre-established base on a planet's surface, even if you had a Pioneer, I would assume it would take a while to produce new ships. But we have estimations with the Crucible saying that it has been like they expect it to be able to repair like a Hornet or something in like a minute or two, like just a couple minutes. Boom, you're good. Now, if that's the case, it would seem more important to be able to repair and return your ships to the base, and also be able to capture enemy ships and put them inside of your crucible, repair them, and use them as your own ships. And then base building would be your production facilities. So we've seen that medium-sized bases or whatever would be fairly quick to put up. We've seen that they've said that gas-powered power sources for bases is going to be faster to build. So that's probably what you're going to want to push for. That's why you got the Starfarers and stuff. And also you have the Vulcans and the Kraken. So even if you don't bring the Starfarers with you while you're getting the base set up, you could use the Vulcans to fill up the fuel inside of the thing, go back to the Kraken, fill up the fuel, put it inside the thing, and then if you had Starfares, you could just bring them later, meet up with the Kraken, fill up the Kraken, you're good to go. All right. So that's the flexibility that you can have with these kind of things that I'm seeing in my head personally. And then being able to set up multiple ground bases at the same time, which the Pioneer couldn't do. We also don't know the sizes of different bases. Like, if a planet doesn't have a massive pile of resources for you to exploit, is it worthwhile to bring a Pioneer in the first place instead of just building like a smaller, medium-sized refinery area there and piling everything up and going and bringing it? But the other benefit to this is if we are building bases, and I do expect them to have a ground vehicle that allows you to build, large bases. And we saw the tower in CitizenCon that they said there was a specialized vehicle that specifically makes that tower, which also then makes large buildings. Then I would expect to be able to build a good amount of large buildings. And from what we've seen in the CitizenCon thing, they had large manufacturing plants and they had large hangars, which means that as long as you could land your Kraken down on a planet's surface, you could then build a base, build everything up, and then build a large hangars to store your Perseus in, to store your Crucible and your Liberator and stuff in. So after you get on the planet's surface and you're able to settle your base and you're good to go, you can store those large ships so you don't have to, risk them all the time, and then reconsolidate all of your ship pilots and your crew into one big force again, which would allow you to just, operate and do ground operations a lot more efficiently, and also allow you to use your Kraken as a hub like it should be, instead of just using all these storage areas inside your base. And also the Kraken's turrets are basically your base's defense plus whatever ground vehicles you have when you're setting up your operations. So you want your primary base, and then you want your mining facility bases. And you're probably going to put those ground vehicles towards the mining facilities for defense, and then you keep your Kraken around your main base as protection, respawning, transportation, all that kind of thing. And after you get all your mining vehicles and stuff put into a mining claim or whatever, surely you could just move them around with like basic vehicles. The Kraken or the Carracks could go and pick up quite a few because you can fit 8 Rock DSs into one Carrack. So that alone is already enough to like move them around after you get the Crucible and stuff there. So you could make the argument for having multiple Liberators, right? But you don't really need multiple Liberators. Having extra top pads would be nice, but having 2 Vulcans or even 1 Vulcan allows you to send out the Vulcan to repair a lot of your ground vehicles and stuff in the battlefield, as well as your ships. And then your Crucibles would be mostly there to repair your capital ships because you're going to have to keep them functional. So there's a lot of moving parts, but when you really look at the small scale, it's not really that big. All right. You have small subdivisions of 2 or 3 ships that work on their own, and then together they make a bigger picture. But it's a very versatile fleet that can provide gameplay from anywhere from 2 people, 5 people, 6 people, 8 people, 10 people, 12 people, 24 people, 50 people. It just keeps going up and up and up. Whereas, people who go out and they've bought like a Javelin, you have 80 people that you're going to have on the Javelin, and like some, maybe you have some fighters or something on there, but there's not a whole lot of gameplay that you could all do at the same time. So there's not enough flexibility for me there anyway. And so this is a general idea when it comes to like a flexible fleet and a good ground plan, I think, for you know exploration, base building, combat, you know, ground mining, things like that. And then if you can produce a production facility, say you are able to produce a base on a planet's surface, you get a large production plant. And we've seen in the in CitizenCon, they were able to produce small ships, which potentially could be the Prospector, the Vulture. So you would be able to do salvage and mining, but you'd have to set up the production facilities first, which is perfectly fine. Now, as much as I would prefer to have like a reclaimer or something, potentially, go around and do salvage, I don't necessarily need to focus on that. Somebody somewhere is going to have a reclaimer or want to do salvage, and they're going to earn one and expand on this fleet. And that's how you grow an org, I think, organically more from the ground up. Is you have the basics. Like this fleet design here. Now, I've been working on this for a little while. You have the basis to cover pretty much any loop in the game that I could really think of. You have repair and medical, at least the base standard stuff that you need. You can um, salvage, or not salvage, but you could repair and get ships fully functional again from a dead state potentially, from planets or things that you find or enemies. So you have potential to gain ships that you could give out to people in your fleet. You have the ability to support gas operations, you have mining operations, ground mining, space mining. You have protection for it. You have the repair for it. You have the fuel for it. I mean, there's not a whole lot that you can really ask for on top of this besides, research facilities and things like that. But after you get an org going, I believe, people are going to want to have their own roles, their own goals that they want. And so if people want to go and do salvage and stuff, this would be, a pathway for them to earn that salvage ship and go out there and do it. If they want to go do research, you have a pathway to earn it, go out there and do it. And so there's a lot of balance here without needing a whole lot. And then if somebody really wants to like buy one of these ships in the fleet, then they can just replace one of the ships that are in the fleet. But in the future, if components and stuff become very valuable, I start seeing organization fleets becoming a lot more important because people aren't going to want to lose their components and their gear on their ships if they don't have to, I would assume. And so if we're going into hostile territory, probably want to have something that's able to defend yourself and not lose all the work that you put into your own personal ship if you're doing something for an org. And I would assume, people out there probably want to see a lot of the planets in the game. And even now, like if we get to 5 systems, we're looking at multiple planets, multiple moons per systems. I've been playing 10 years or whatever plus, I've seen a good portion of the tech and stuff as it was being made, but I still haven't spent a ton of time on most of these planets or moons. I've maybe went to like 2 or 3 of the moons. I've went to each of the planets, you know, but when we have 5 systems, are you going to want to be staring at Microtech all day or like, I've been just staring at Yella for forever, Crusader, you know people are going to want to move, they're going to explore, there's going to be creatures and stuff out there, like things that you've never seen before at some point. And it just seems a shame to just sit back and do like a simple route and not ever see any of the game that we've waited so long for. And I think that this opens up the door for so many players, like even cargo, you know. You have the ability to transport cargo with your Starfarers and your Kraken. Kraken has like almost 4,000 SU of cargo space. Like just to like pull some of this up on the cargo space here. I don't know exactly, how much each of these cargo ships do, but I know like the Carrack has like 450 or whatever, but I would probably only keep one of the cargo pods empty. So you're looking at 300, cargo space or so between 2 Carracks. 250 or whatever on a Starfarer, so you're looking at 500, 600 right there. You got a Liberator 400, so you're at 1,000. You got Crucibles at like 250, so you're like, um, uh, you know, 1,500. Kraken, you got like 3,700 or something, so you're at 5,200 or something like that. Perseus and stuff, not very much cargo space on those. Polaris those like 200 and something. But let's just say that we don't use any of that for any valuable cargo. I mean, you still got 5,000, 6,000 cargo in the rest of the ships. That is a ton of cargo. That is a ridiculous amount of cargo for like cargo haulers, people that like moving boxes all day, you know. But I think at any point in the game, I don't care what people say, at some point you are going to get tired of being safe and doing the same thing over and over. And you're going to want a gun in your hand and to do some action, all right? I don't care who you are. So you might as well build a fleet that's able to do everything that you want if you're really wanting to for an org. And I think this is it, you know? You got ground combat, you got space combat, you got, exploration, you got repair, you got mining, you got, base building, you got medical, you got uh, I don't know, vehicle transport. If you really want to, you just send the Liberator and the Crucibles and like the Polaris and Perseus out and transport vehicles to your location. Like, there's a lot of craziness that could go on here. So, y'all guys have a good one. I'm gonna go to bed, and I'll see y'all next time. All right.